Hi, folks. This is Pat Healy here from the Laker News. I'm going to be interviewing Kody Blois, the Liberal MP for Kings-Hants, and Darrell Samson, the MP for Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. Welcome, folks.
Hi, Pat. Nice to see you.
Great to see you as always, Pat.
All right. So first off, we're going to talk about the budget. What are some of the highlights for you both in the budget? Childcare seems to be a big one that might be good for many here in our province. So talk a little bit about the budget.
Do you want me to go first, Pat?
Yes, please.
Sure. So I think it's important just to give a bit of context to the way that this budget was framed. And right now in Nova Scotia, we're back under lockdown. We've been able to avoid the majority of that throughout the pandemic. We've done a great job, but other parts of the country have still been really challenged. And there's still 300,000 jobs plus across the country that have not been able to come back as a result of the pandemic. And so right from day one, the priority for our government has been, we're going to put supports in place for individuals and businesses until we get through the pandemic. But we also need to make sure we can get those people back to work that have not been able to do so, and to be able to grow the economy to make sure that the spending that we've taken on during the pandemic, rightfully so, is sustainable over time. So I think that's the budget frame that we came in. For your listeners and the people that are going to watch this, it's $101 billion of spending over the next 3 years, which is comparable to what other countries around the world are doing, because it sounds like a big number, and it is, and it's going to be important investments, and I'll get to those, but it is comparable to what other jurisdictions around the world are doing, and it's all focused on growth and being able to get people back to work to grow the economy. For me in Kings-Hants, and Darrell will have his own for his riding, for me, affordable housing is a major issue across the country. It seems as of late, it has really found its way to the doorsteps in Nova Scotia. So $7 billion for affordable housing over the next 5 years is something that I was really pleased to see in the budget. $40,000 interest-free loans for individuals that want to renovate and retrofit their homes. I know a lot of people in my riding, having that opportunity to access that capital to make the investments that will help lower their energy costs on their home is a really important program. In Kings-Hants, it's small business that really drive the economy. And so whether or not it's the rehiring program of being able to try to get workers back to work, whether or not it's funding around the digitization, helping small businesses be able to get their services and products online to kind of where more and more consumers are looking. And then finally, merchant fees. And Darrell, I'm sure will say the same, because there's lots of really good restaurants and small businesses in his riding. But merchant fees are some of the highest in the world, particularly in Canada, for restaurants, for other groups. Being able to reduce those credit card fees is going to be really important. And finally, I'll say two others, Pat, because there's so much here. We could literally speak for hours on this. 3 Indigenous communities in Kings-Hants with Sibäganägäti, Glooscap, and Annapolis Valley First Nation. Historic investments in those Indigenous communities, and finally would be tourism. When you think the Annapolis Valley, when you think Hants County, we have the highest tides in the world. We have an emerging wine sector. Tourism is an important piece, and there's good investments there. But I don't want to do all the talking. I'll go over to my colleague, who I'm sure will have others.
Yes, Darrell. Okay, the screen's falling down on me, but that's okay. We will continue. Darrell, what does the budget bring to Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook?
Well, many of the things that my colleague Kody shared with us earlier apply here in Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. As you know, we're in the outskirts of Halifax and Dartmouth. Many people live here but don't work here, so it's a little different in that sense. But there's many great things in the budget that we can really tap into. One is also the community infrastructure fund that will be available. That will help small communities with small projects, and there's so many important organizations throughout the riding and Nova Scotia that can benefit and have been looking for some support. And sometimes $5,000-$10,000 goes a long way. As Kody said, tourism is an essential piece, and they've taken the bulk of the hit through this pandemic, and we got to do something to help them, to keep them afloat, because we know that they bring a lot of the economy. It's a big piece of our economy, and we need to continue that. I do want to touch a little bit, of course, because I'm Parliamentary Secretary for Veteran Affairs. The investments in the budget, the $5 million per year, 15 million over 3 years, added to the 3 million a year for the Family Wellbeing Fund. That's a fund available for various individuals and organizations that do all kinds of activities to support veterans and their families. There's some money in there as well for mental health for veterans. And these would be those that are waiting for their disability benefits to be studied and decision taken. They can get the supports while waiting, and that's been a very important factor since day one. And another nice piece that hasn't been there before, it's new, is the reduction investment, $45 million for a pilot project to reduce veterans' homelessness. As you know, our government has a strong national framework for eliminating homelessness, 50% by 2025, I think it is. This is investment for veterans. That's a big investment. As you know as well, Pat, I have a very large Black African Nova Scotian community, and there's some big investments to support them. A new Black-led philanthropic endowment fund, which is a fund that will help various organizations for youth and social development, if you want, in those communities, and also 100 million for supporting Black Canadian community initiatives. Also very important, this budget is because of this pandemic, of course, it's been very tough on certain groups. It's been very tough on women and young people. So some investments you'll see to support women back to work, but also that national childcare that you spoke of at the beginning is so important. We're going to see some big savings for families, up to 50% in next year, and down to $10 per day is our objective by 2026, which would really, as you know, we're looking for more and more people to join the workforce. And we have a large percentage of individuals that are not because of childcare, and many of them are women, and this will create that opportunities for them. And as I indicated, as Kody said, there's all kinds of things for supporting the business community that we've put forward and continued to do so, and students with investments to help them with their student debts, which is a priority. So those are some of the key things in my writing, Pat.
And thank you guys for the answers there. Now, obviously, everything sounds rosy with the budget that came out. However, it also brings with it a record deficit. That's a hard pill to swallow for many Nova Scotians. What are you saying to those doubters? And I'll begin the answering with Darrell first.
Well, that's a really good question because many people are talking about that. But you know, the first thing people have to keep in mind is so important. It's not just Canada that's borrowing to support their people and their communities. It's the world. This is a world pandemic. So everybody, if we all borrow money, we're all borrowing money, and it puts us on the same playing field. That's extremely important. Second thing is, as the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on many occasions, we have the backs of Canadians. We can afford as a country to invest in Canadians more than individual families to burden this cost, which would be extremely difficult. And the reason we are in a great position to do that is because the economy just before the pandemic in Canada was one of the best economies ever. 40%, a 40-year low, if you want, in unemployment in Canada. 1.2 million jobs have been created by Canadians. Those were big numbers. Our economy was very strong. That allowed us to do that. But now, Pat, the most important thing I can say about that question, which is so important, because we've been able to refinance, you know, the interest rate is much lower. If you have a mortgage and you have to refinance right now, it's an ideal time to do so. Anybody can refinance their debt loads. Canada has refinanced our debt load, and with the extra $284 billion that we had to support, we used to support Canadians, we're actually paying almost $3 billion less on the interest on the debt. So tell me, was this a great move? This was a fabulous move, and I'm proud of our government to make that move.
Anything to add, Kody?
Darrell speaks with a lot of passion, so it's difficult to necessarily follow up on. I guess what I would say is, you know, what alternative did the government have in the midst of the pandemic to be able to put food on the table for Canadians, to support businesses. It was really key. And now we're at a juncture, as Darrell mentioned, other countries around the world are making investments to be able to support the future of their economies, to be able to support the outcomes that are necessary. We're doing the exact same. And as I mentioned before, and Darrell reiterated, Canada is not doing anything unlike other countries comparable around the world. It is a fair question to ask about our fiscal position. Those are fair questions. But if you actually look at the budget document, our debt to GDP ratio is expected to decline over the next 5 years because the investments that we're making are going to grow the economy. And sometimes what I get a lot on the doorstep is, well, my grandkids, and we're never going to be able to pay this off. If you look at the history of debt across sovereign nations, generally it never is paid off. The economy and the productivity grows at a rate that is higher than the debt services and the debt that is taken on. So you look at World War II. Different circumstances, but the same idea, where government spent a lot of money to be able to protect Canadians, to be able to make the investments that were necessary. That was never really truly paid off. The economy just grew at a rate that was higher than the debt that took on. So I compare it to people borrowing money from a bank to buy a property and a house to build a better future for their people. We're doing the same thing.
The next question's about mental health. I didn't really see a lot about mental health in the budget. So what can you say are supports for the coming budget? And sorry if you guys hear the fire trucks going, but anyway, just what can you say about mental health?
So there was $45 million in the budget, Pat, to establish national mental health standards. That's a great start, where we need to be able to try to create a national approach to this. Healthcare is the domain of the provinces, but yet we've been a government that has been standing there with the provinces to be able to make those necessary investments. There's also over $100 million for the Public Health Agency of Canada to help support a variety of initiatives over the next 2 years to reduce kind of challenges because of the pandemic, because of mental health. And there was also a block of funding, that went to the provinces around healthcare. For example, we put $3 billion into long-term healthcare to try to create national standards as well. These are all very important investments. There's not a block of funding for $5 billion towards mental health, but there's a lot of important initiatives. And I think Darrell can speak to, I wasn't part of it last Parliament. There was a lot of strategic investments last Parliament where the federal government provided money to the provinces with conditions attached around trying to keep seniors in their home, and also some mental health outcomes. He might be able to speak a little bit more about that, but I know they existed.
Yeah, thank you, Kody. Very important. Mental health is a big issue right across this country, and it's been for a long, long time, but government has not focused their funding in that area in the past. And this is something that's a top priority. And when we renegotiated the transfer payment, the health transfer payment back 4 years ago, as Kody said, there was 2 areas that were new investments, never done before, but the people in the communities and the provinces were screaming for it. One was directly towards mental health, to support mental health and families and individuals. And the second one was keeping seniors, older people at home as well, which was supporting indirectly those individuals as long as they could stay in their homes. I've also mentioned that with veterans that we're going to do the mental health work, those that are applying for disability benefits, they will be able to tap into mental health services while they are waiting. And the other pieces as well, like, that to me is part of mental health and health is autism and diabetes. Our budget has focused some investments around establishing a national autism strategy. I know that people in autism have been very strong advocating for this now for at least since I've been elected in 2015. And the other piece is also the national framework for diabetes and the national strategy for autism, which are 2 key points. There's also looking at establishing some analysis and assessments, if you want, around people with disabilities. So we were able to give $600 one-time payment. I think it's coming out now in April, May here. One-time payment, tax-free for people with disabilities. So that's always trying to, have a horizontal approach to supporting people with challenges, with disabilities, and with mental health as well. So big investments in that area. Governments need to work together to support Canadians in that way. We know that a top priority in Nova Scotia is healthcare, and we are trying to do what we can to support provinces, especially here in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. We have the largest number of seniors, of course, in the country.